paper magic will survive like the heat death of the universe and will...
Oh, it's a smuggler's copter. Would you like to crew this? And then it crashes because they don't understand arithmetic.
All your cards belong to me.
2 minutes into macing him in the eyeballs, I switched to pepper spray. He's like, it's all right, refreshing. And went back to the mace.
Magic is dying. I'm done. Selling everything.
I might be a hoarder. And yes,
I don't have the crayons or glue to explain this to you right now.
What, are you gonna die twice?
Oil will be worthless before magic cards will.
Well, okay, Dr. Man.
That's Mr. Dr. Professor Jason.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Brainstorm Brewery. I'm your host, Corbin Hostler. That's it. It's just me this week. No other hosts. I'm free. All those jokes they made about me being dead. Am I dead? Do I have to go, woo, and fall under the camera, which you would see if you were watching the Brainstorm Brewery on YouTube, of course. But no, I don't have to do any of that because I'm free of all of them. All my other co-hosts have bailed this week. It is just me and the editor, JJ Jackson, coming in, as always, clutch when we need him most, as he does as the editor of this podcast. Welcome on, JJ.
Well, we do what we can to make sure you don't have to talk to yourself for an hour.
I could do it. I told them when people got sick, out of town, etc. I told them I did once cast an entire season of a League of Legends league by myself. I would get, because look, you may not know it from this show on the role I play, but I'm actually very good at talking fast and shouting out action, and it was really fun. And then I would have to do this whole shift change and kind of take the other side. Anyway, I had a whole plan for an hour-long show by myself, but we decided to spare all of you, the listeners, that trauma. And
it would be
JJ
entertaining. I don't know if it would be good.
Yeah, you're right. It'd be great.
We'll never know. Hey,
we will
get
know.
in the comments. Let us know if you need a Corbin solo cast. This might just become at episode 600 episodes in, we decide to just completely change the Brainstorm Brewery model, and it's just a solo cast with each one of the hosts.
Week to week. I only have to cast once a month. I'm in. I am the only sole surviving original host of the show. Jason didn't come in until episode 7 or 8. Little Brainstorm Brewery lore for all of you listeners who weren't here 593 episodes ago or whatever.
601. This is officially in the 600s now.
Congrats to us for 600 episodes, I guess.
Yeah.
I should put that on job resumes. Right?
Yeah, you should.
Gaming as an industry is imploding. I have no idea if we'll have jobs.
But you still have
future.
a 600 episode long podcast?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't want any potential employer to go listen to the podcast, so there is that potential hang up. So
right. That's why I say mostly on my resumes audio editing for a podcast, and then I put the amount of episodes I've edited, but do not mention the podcast directly, because I'm inevitably they're going to open up one of our weirder episodes.
Well, and can you imagine you in this is you're somebody who works in porn, JJ. That's what you're telling me.
Yeah, where they're
that is what you're telling me.
Listen, I am proud of the work we do on this podcast. I just don't want to have to explain to people. It's hard enough to explain. Hey, what's the podcast about?
You did
it's
a
about
great job lighting the porn
game.
scene. It looked great while that dude's big balls were flopping down on that woman. You did a great job lighting that scene, Gaffer.
Yeah, exactly. It's just really hard to motivate yourself to be hey, I'm going to put this on my demo reel.
Yes, I do. Anyway, welcome into the show, everybody. This is me and JJ. And in the show notes, I have me and JJ and Taylor Swift, and that's because throughout this episode, I am refreshing Ticketmaster obsessively to try to get Taylor Swift Eras Tour tickets for when I'm in Amsterdam. If you are going to Pro Tour Amsterdam, just saying, it's doable. And in Europe, they are required to resell the tickets at a reasonable price. That said, there were 3,200 people in front of me in the queue earlier, and when you get there's obviously no tickets available. We've seen one pair go up. We were not fast enough to get them, but we've got another month to keep trying.
Yeah, you just got to keep going, right?
Yeah, so,
can you imagine a country that regulates
drift off during
this
episode? It's not because you're boring me. It's because I'm looking at Taylor Swift tickets for real.
It's more I want you to get them in the middle of this episode and just start screaming in glee.
That would be nice. Oh, in that case, then all right. Here, I got this website is in Dutch, so that's.
I'm gonna need a screenshot of this for YouTube.
I don't. I'm typing in the security code. You can cut some of this later. Marianne's on a 120-day streak of Dutch on Duolingo.
Yeah,
She's been preparing for this Amsterdam trip for a while.
So she knows like 8 words.
Oh, there's only 124 people in front of me in the queue right now because it's fucking 6 a.m. in Europe.
Yes, time zones for the win.
Let's go.
Listen, time travel is one of our greatest powers. As to reference another Dropout TV show,
I don't know what that is. You guys talk about this, and at this point, I'm not afraid to ask because Jason's not here to yell at me.
As we all Dropout is probably the single best not major non-large video channel. Like
not
they are
named
streaming
Brainstorm Brewery.
Yeah, we don't put out enough content to be a channel. But they're formerly College Humor. Then they were purchased by somebody else.
Okay.
Yeah. And then that company collapsed and cut them loose. And Sam Reich, who is a Nepo baby it was his dad's Bill Clinton's financial
Sounds to me like
advisor
he's a
when he
Nepo-
was president.
Sounds to me like he's a Nepo adult. You shouldn't infantilize Nepo adults. Go on.
Sure. I mean, he refers to himself as a Nepo baby, so I don't think it's insulting. But he, through some way, managed to buy Dropout for pennies on the dollar.
I think I've seen
it.
this going around. He sold it, got
Yeah.
rich, and then bought it back for pennies on the dollar, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Good for him.
And now they're producing
American dream.
amazing content. Like, seriously, some of the funniest ad-lib, improv, D&D, sketch comedy on the internet. And it costs less than any of your other streaming services. And truly, even if you're like, I don't know if this is good, buy it for a few months.
You want me to subscribe to another service I'm going to forget about and keep paying for?
No, I want you to forget about the other ones and watch Dropout.
Great. Good advice, JJ. Speaking of JJ's advice, we've got more JJ advice coming because we now have the Modern Horizons 3 spoiler completely in. And JJ has in the show notes here, I'm going to read this right, storm and land destruction. You have my attention.
Yeah, so I know we've talked a fair bit about Modern Horizons 3 stuff as it's been leaked and then going in. And I feel like Eldrazi has sucked up all the oxygen in the room.
It has. It's certainly been the most exciting, and for Commander and for possibly Modern, because it's a theme, right? There's a bunch of Eldrazi.
Right.
It's not kind of one-offs.
Well, and it's very straightforward. And
Yeah.
to be fair, I think it's probably the most powerful cards in the set largely fall into that category. Like when we talk about things like Erupting Nullkite and Ugin's Labyrinth and all of the other amazing cards that are coming out. I think the new Emrakul is going to be really interesting when blue-white players decide they really want to venture in and use it as their finisher of choice. But I wanted to talk about the other cards in the set, the other archetypes that are getting like getting like boons to them and maybe get to walk out of Modern Horizons 3, either coming out of like the dredges of Modern where everyone's like, oh, this is a cool fun deck, but you're going to go to F&M with it and you're never going to ever like try to enter it in a real tournament.
To set the stage here, Modern Horizons 2 was dominated by one cycle of free spells, right? The force of free cards came in Modern Horizons 1, and those were pretty good. But then Modern Horizons 2, the pitch elementals just completely changed the format in a way that I would argue that the force of whatever spells in the first Modern Horizons didn't. Force of negation, of course, was a huge deal. Force of vigor kind of mattered, but like by and large, those had nothing near the effect of grief or fury or even working down the line, subtlety or solitude. And heck, the best one, the green one, Endurance, the best designed one, I think, has had a positive. But these cards dominate the format. And Modern Horizons 3, people, of course, are worried about that as well in some ways with the flare cycle of free spells. But it does feel like Modern Horizons 3 is similar to Modern Horizons 1 in that there are a ton of individual deck call outs, right? And throwbacks and little pieces of gold that outside of the Eldrazi, as you mentioned, there's a lot of this to go further into the format. So that kind of sets the stage for why this set is kind of hitting a little different than Modern Horizons 2 did for people, and what we can look at here once we get past sort of the headliners you've heard of.
Yeah, and it will be interesting. Like, I think Storm, we might be able to see with the rubies coming in, that accelerating, because like you turn Pyretic Ritual into
Rite of Flame, yeah.
You turn it into Rite of Flame. Manamorphose becomes something altogether better, and then you also have in combination with that Ral, which I love the design of Ral.
So which one is Ral? Ral is a 2-drop 1/3 transformed planeswalker. Starts as a creature. Instant sorcery spells cost 1 less to cast. When you ever cast an instant sorcery during your turn, flip a coin. If you lose the flip, it takes 1 damage to you. But if you won the flip, you can exile Ral and then return him transformed. Okay. Oh god.
Yeah. So
the backside has a lot of words. Which ones do we care about?
All of them. We care about all of them. Corbin.
Fun.
But the thing I like about Ral's design in the Storm deck is there's a risk reward aspect going on with him, right? On when do you try to flip him, or do you just stack your flip triggers and then decide at what point you want to jump into the trying to flip him? I think that there's a lot of
interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Like, I don't know if it will make Storm good, but I think it adds this.
Well, Storm always played Baral, right? Which discounted.
And he's just an
spells.
Electromancer, right?
Right, and you play Electromancer, these cards that just do nothing but discount it. But like Baral would only basically never, but maybe very rarely come up where you'd get the loot off of countering something. And of course, Electromancer has no abilities at all. But now, you're talking about Ral is a whole different angle.
Right.
That said, you could the idea is that you could get him into play immediately with 8 counters if you have if you cast 6 instants or sorceries that turn before you transform him, and then you can exile the top 8 immediately and play him for free. Certainly a huge upside. While like when you're just replacing Electromancer,
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and we have Brainstone and the not quite Brainstorm card that comes in the set, the blue one. Brain Surge, thanks. That would allow you to potentially, I have my win condition in hand, put it on top of my deck and as a setup to then -8 Ral and cast it for free to finish. I think it will be interesting. I think another deck that gets a lot of gas out of Modern Horizons 3 is Elves. I just don't know if it will be good enough.
Elves does get some cards, doesn't it? They just they keep reprinting cards that were broken in Elves 10 years ago in Legacy, and I think they're finding that they're not any good in Modern, but they're trying again. What's the big ones this time around?
You've got Wirewood Symbiote.
Yep.
That's going off. You've got Priestess of Titania. You've got
seem like huge Elves cards.
right. Like if this was 2011, 2012, I'd be thrilled, right?
If this was 2022 and there was no Orcus Bowmasters, maybe.
Yeah. Well, and the thing about Elves is if you can get the first Lord down, you're probably okay. But getting the first Lord down is going to be a big lift.
Especially against the Bowmasters deck, because they're not just going to have Bowmasters.
Right. You get Sylvan Safekeeper, which is pretty big.
True. You can
protect it.
Yeah.
You also get the Disciple of Freyles, which I think is an interesting card to look at in elves. It's 6 mana, 3 green. But when it enters the battlefield, you can sacrifice a creature, and if you do, you gain X life and draw X cards. Where
or
its
it's
power.
a land on the back.
But it's a land on the backside, so you don't have to. It's one of the pay 3 life come in.
Yeah, come to play untapped.
So
all of those are playable, almost just
Right.
by virtue of their just by it having that option.
And sometimes elves ran into this problem in Modern where it's like, okay, well,
Regal
I made 8 mana and I have nothing to do with it.
Yeah, that's they'd play Regal Force or Craterhoof, right?
Mhm. So I think this card gives you something to do with it, even if you're drawing 3 cards.
Yeah.
That's good. But I mean, I feel like you could go even bigger with it. Like if you have an Azuri pumping, although if you're at that point, you've probably already won the game.
Yeah, the point is though, I mean, I don't know if this really basically changes anything in elves, but you certainly the cool part about cards like this and their design is by putting if they come into play tapped just all the time, that is I think just too much of a cost. That's not going to fly in elves certainly, but most modern decks. You stick the 3 life untapped clause on these, almost all of them become playable. There were certainly times in standard where just random, even like the fling land that would come into play tapped could be playable, just because having the options were so powerful. So especially in a deck like elves, where I mean, it's not that your life total doesn't matter, but you're usually the beatdown when you're playing elves. So paying 3 life in a worst case scenario, probably not the end of the world. And the best case scenario is obviously very high. And the thing is, it's basically just free because your deck played like 16 forests.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you play a little bit of black still because you probably still play Shaman of the Pact as like a way to just dome them out of nowhere. But yeah, it will be interesting. I want to see. I know that Aspiring Spike talks about elves being a hidden gem in Modern that he thinks is better than people give it credit for. Everyone just assumes it's dead because they're a bunch of X1s, which is understandable.
Imagine playing against Yawgmoth or something.
Right.
You can't interact. You can't stop them from playing Yawgmoth, and Yawgmoth will kill your entire board immediately. The game will end. Or they'll play Bowmasters and wreck you. Like, there's just so many matchups that feel very bad, I would think, as an Elves player. And the counter to that before, and we can substitute Elves for sort of any deck that we're talking about in Modern that's getting new pieces but has fallen out of favor, is that the pieces in Elves that kind of brought you back from that were like Collected Company. And that's right. You can't get away with casting that really in Modern
4 men is just too much anymore.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone can do it, if anyone can do it, it's Elves. But the point is, even resolving Collected Company is not like getting you. It's unlikely to solve the problem.
2 for 1-ing is not good enough.
Yeah, at least when you're 2 for 1-ing mana dorks into play.
Yeah.
All right, what else are you looking at?
So one of the other ones I'm looking at, it kind of ties in. It's really centered around Amped Raptor, which I think is
People have talked about this one.
This card is crazy good. This card is I don't think people are sleeping on it because I've heard plenty of people talk about this card, but it feels like Ephemerate was to Modern Horizons 1 as Amped Raptor is going to be to Modern Horizons 3. I think this card is going to be the uncommon that all of a sudden becomes like $4 or $5 and people are scrounging around trying to find it.
All right. So what Amped Raptor does, it is a 2/1 first striking dinosaur for 2 mana, 1 in a red. Definitely putting this into my Ingredient blue deck. Well, maybe I'm not. We'll find out. When Amped Raptor enters the battlefield, you get 2 energy. Then, if you cast it from your hand, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card. You can cast a card by paying energy equal to its mana cost. So this will go to you hit the first non-land card you have, and then if you have the energy, you can cast it by paying that energy. So, a couple different things you can do with this. Where do you think is probably the first place you're looking?
The immediate place that I think it slots in is Burn, right?
Yes,
like if you get a 2/1 first strike that then also casts your Helix, casts your Lightning Bolt,
everything but Rift
everything
Bolt.
but Skewer.
Skewer and Rift Bolt are the only things it won't do.
Yeah. And even then, maybe you cut the Rift Bolts out of the deck at that point.
Well, that's what. Well, listen, if Armed Raptor is essentially another copy of a different burn spell, then putting Armed Raptor in place of
Amped Raptor
of Skewer or whichever, like that, it's not exactly the same thing, but it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that that's an easy, no questions asked, where it goes in. But I think it would be interesting to see interesting in the worst way possible, because I hate Footfalls decks, but I think crashing Footfalls with like some top deck manipulation and this card acting as another Bloodbraid, although you can't really run this card and Bloodbraid.
Listen, you can Shardless Agent into Amped Raptor into Ancestral Vision.
There you go. Card advantage.
You can also, you ready for this one?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to quote the great Frank Karsten here. Specifically, imagine that you run a deck with 58 Mountains, Amped Raptor, and Thassa's Oracle. You take London Mulligans until you have both cards in hand, then put Thoracle on bottom. Next, you cast Amped Raptor on turn 2, exile your library, cast a Thoracle, and win the game. Of course, the probability to have both cards in hand is only 1.2%, so even with 6 possible mulligans, your strategy will fail completely in over 9 out of 10 games. Nevertheless, if you want to build a hilarious modern deck on a budget that can win in memorable fashion if the stars align, then this one is fun to imagine. Thanks, Frank.
Nothing like Frankie numbers coming
I
in
agree.
to bring the blanket of reality.
Bring the
down upon
numbers.
us.
Bring the math. Love it. Buy the numbers with Frank Karsten. Check out that series, by the way.
But I think there are a lot of fun ways to build around this, because unlike something like a Bloodbraid or a Shardless Agent, you don't have to build your deck around, oh, I can't have anything that costs less than 3. This builds your deck around, I want everything in my deck to cost less than 2.
It sort of naturally fits into a lot of decks already, especially prowess decks. Especially prowess decks.
And I think that it slots into something that I think will be important if an Eldrazi Summer type format starts coming out, which is land destruction becoming big.
What do you think is going to make land destruction a thing?
Well, I think this card, the Raptor, along with the white, what is it called? The White Orchid card, White Orchid Phantom, white, flying first strike. Whenever White Orchid Phantom enters the battlefield, destroy up to 1 target non-basic land. Its controller may search for a basic land card and put it onto the battlefield tapped and shuffle. So I think that card, if we get into an Eldrazi type format, how many wastes do you think you can realistically run in a deck like that? I don't think it's many. And
interesting.
White Phantom, Cleansing Wildfire, which is another 2-mana land destruction spell that draws you a card.
Yeah, that's an interesting one too.
Raptor gets you one of those cards for free. I think that you can start seeing like a form of a red-white Boros. We're just going to attrition you out of the game.
Boros
while
taxes
playing
is actually kind of a thing. Like there has been times in Modern's history where sort of Thalia based decks were a thing. And think about the deck you're describing gets to run Ragavan, which is probably one of the best cards in the format.
You get to
run a lot of good removal.
You get to run the new 2-mana legendary dog, Philia, that blinks a creature on attack, and then if it comes back under your control at the end step, you put a 1/1 counter on it.
Also, this card's also interesting for like blue-white spirits. It's not a human; it wouldn't go in that deck. But what we're talking about, those Boros decks are often human type decks. And then you get Skyclave Apparition at 3 as sort of your catch-all. Like those decks have game. They can be very frustrating to play against. So, all right.
You also, if you're running red-white, you get to play another great new card out of this for Boros, which is Flage, the Titan of Fire's Fury. It's Uro, except it's Lightning Helix.
Yeah, it's a fun one.
Which I think will be great. You get to blinking that card sounds amazingly fun. And once again, if you're playing white, because you're already playing White Orchid Phantom, you can slot in ephemerates to blink it repeatedly to land destruction your opponent. Because let's be honest, in Modern, who's playing basics?
I mean, there's a couple, and yeah, that's about it, though.
Yeah. I mean, like, this is the old Amiria control philosophy. How many basics do you really run in your deck before
I hope you're running not very many, and I can play Harbinger of the Seas and turn them all into islands.
Yeah, there you go. Like, I think Harbingers of the Sea, like, as much as it feels like they've really amped up Eldrazi with Modern Horizons 3, it does feel like they went, we need to give multiple colors answers to...
And just cards in general, for sure. However, they pre-banned Harbinger of the Seas and Historic, so I'm basically off of Magic. That's what I would say.
It's a sad day. It's a sad day.
I cannot begin to express my disappointment. Yeah. All right, let's move on to your favorite part of the show, where we shout out our sponsors like MTGstocks, because they are the best place on the internet to find all of your Magic the Gathering financial information. You can check out the premium side of the website to set up alerts for yourself, to track lists even more in depth. You can do a lot of really personalized, customized tools with that. Very well worth checking out. And of course, it's what we use for all of our picks of the week and breaking bulks and all of that good data information that we give you here on Brainstorm Brewery. So go check out MTGstocks.com. All right. While I have you, JJ, we wanted to get into a little bit of a meaty subject tonight, and we'll see how much we talk about this. But the state of content in Magic. What is your view from the editor seat of how things have sort of changed and like what people are consuming and what's doing well, it seems like, from your perspective of over the last few years?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things, I think we've all seen it since probably 2022. There started to be, during the pandemic, everybody's at home. There's a big boom in Magic content, right? It felt like nobody could get enough content going out, as far as, because everyone was stuck at home. We're like, nothing better to do than watch my favorite card game and hear people's takes on it and play over these online webcam games and things like that. But since 2022, it feels like a lot of these spaces that grew a little bit to build that social networking have like contracted immensely. And I feel like Magic in particular has really suffered as far as the amount of quality content makers in the space.
The money fell out, and therefore so did the, I mean, it's
right.
It's not like, yeah,
you can only
it's
stream
not complicated to post-mortem it, right? Like the money fell out and that was that, right? Like the content creating space died, except for people. And when we say it died, obviously content creators exist. Plenty of content creators do very well. But this is a world where it used to be a path of like,
oh, you could make a
get good,
reasonable living.
It's like get good at F&M, go to a tournament, do well, get a result, get a sample article on a website, get another article on a website, level up. And a lot of people are somewhere in that pipeline making a non-zero amount of money or store credit or just being invested, and it's driving conversation. And that was the thing. And I'm not here to lament the rise of Commander and say that it killed that, because things moved to webcam and therefore YouTube and it became entertainment rather than discussion, right? It became content creators producing content for an audience that is monetized, as opposed to community members sort of writing in their community, right? Just because the nature of writing an article for Star City Games and what you're doing there is very different than making a video for YouTube and putting it out into the world at large, right? So it's just different, I would say.
One of the
and
interesting
the fell out as a result.
Yeah. Well, and part of that is because of a consolidation in the platforms, right? Like back in the day, we had, Star City, Channel Fireball, TCG Player. We had like 7 or 8 different content platforms all putting out daily articles or more.
and some
and
of them
all
behind
putting out
paywalls,
videos. Yeah. And as there's been a consolidation of companies eating each other up, and whether that's good for the Magic space or not, you can certainly argue, but the end result is that it feels like the space of Magic has shifted from entertainment to amusement, and that's a problem.
That's
so like
interesting. What do you mean by that?
So entertainment, like in its classical definition, requires you to entertain something in your mind, which means it requires you to engage your brain and think about something.
You're engaging my brain with this. Keep going.
So you have to engage your brain and think about something. You can't just like turn it off and like just consume. Whereas amusement doesn't require you to engage your thinking at all, right? Amusement says, I just watch the thing, I find it good and happy, and it makes me happy.
That's where
But it doesn't actually do anything for you mentally stimulating wise necessarily. And that's the big difference, is this shift, I feel, from entertainment, which I feel like a lot of deck building articles and like constructive talking about how you're navigating the pieces of this puzzle that are the game of Magic, we're doing, to, okay, well, now I'm just going to consume content, which is, okay, we're going to watch somebody else play a game, and it's like a TV show for me. It's the difference between watching a Michael Bay film and watching a Christopher Nolan film, is how I would put it.
Huh.
That's the difference between amusement and entertainment. And I feel like Magic has started shifting away from being entertainment, where we're engaging mentally with what's being produced and we're thinking about it, to, okay, I'm just going to sit back in my chair and watch it. And while that can be profitable for some, I think it's worse for the community.
Well, and I'll tell you why, without debating definitions of words, or I don't know if I would use the same words as you to describe it, but I do think what you're, to me, this is a result in some ways of, if competitive Magic is the dominant form of discussion online, that is where, therefore, the money will flow, the sponsorship money will flow. A downstream function of competitive Magic being the focus of all of those marketing dollars, whether it's from Wizards or anywhere else, or any other content company, or anything that's sponsoring content creators, right? It goes to Commander shows, right? Because those pull the numbers. But a result of that is, you're right, people watch those to be, whether I would say to be entertained, but sure, to be amused. Yeah. And what there isn't is this. I don't want to upset people by using the words drive to self-improve, but your goal with Commander isn't to qualify for the Commander Pro Tour. It's just to have fun playing. It doesn't matter. Yeah. Therefore, whether you consume the content or not doesn't really change anything, right? It's just for amusement, as you said, which is fine. However, if competitive Magic is that, well, now you're driven by trying to do well at this tournament. Doing well at this tournament requires this extra work of reading these articles, which then creates a demand for the articles, which then creates a demand for the websites, which then creates a demand for selling the cards for the stores. That entire ecosystem has withered.
Withered.
Collapsed.
It hasn't collapsed. It's not gone, but
I'm
it's
a writer for
certainly not
TCG player. I don't want to say it's collapsed and sound negative. That said, the type of writing that we do is very different than it was when I was with TCG players 6 years ago.
Yeah. And I think that there's nothing wrong. Play Magic the way you enjoy Magic. If you don't enjoy playing at PTs and GPs and competitive events and tournaments, then enjoy not playing those events. Like, maybe a more casual format's where you're at. But I also think even in a more casual format, we've lost the concept of becoming a better Magic player. Like, wow. It's just like, we'll just.
Not everyone plays Magic to become a better Magic player, though. That's true. That's the thing. Like, you are somebody who entered Magic when Commander didn't exist. You played Magic, and the thing you did in Magic was you played to get better at Magic. Now, if you come in, the thing you do, and I'm not saying anything negative or generalizing, but maybe the thing you do when you come into Magic is you buy a set of Fallout Precon decks with your friends and you play it as board game night once every few months, and you just don't really care whether or not you've gotten technically better at the skill of ordering the stack properly.
Right. And there's something to be said for that, right? Like, I don't want to sound like an angry old man yelling at the clouds saying that you need to play Magic or engage with Magic this way. Because
we're
I think
just discussing the effects of it, because
the effect of it is there is less quality.
There's less demand for that type of content, because Commander content is time. It is eternal. It is not timely in the way that articles that you need to read for a tournament coming up this weekend is. And look, that's great. You can go watch a Commander show from 2 years ago and be amused by it. That's awesome for that world, right? It's not necessarily as awesome for a store trying to sell cards from the new set, or anything like that, right? So these are just the ways for people who have been around Magic for a long time. May sound like we're lamenting things. We're not. We're explaining how it used to be and how it is now. Because look, it is awesome that people who could not succeed because they were not competitive Magic players, and when there was not a market for their content, because their content was not given a chance to shine, it got no attention from Wizards, or everything was focused on competitive Magic play. Like, not saying that was better, but it did. The ecosystem has changed, and as alongside all of this, parallel to it, of course, is the consolidation of the companies in general, and the automation and the everything becoming more
and
efficient,
all the sets coming out,
and therefore the profit margin for your average content website getting ground down over the last 15 years. Like, all of that happened alongside the shift in attention that we're talking about.
Right. I mean, it's your classic economic model, as far as like when you can have arbitrary number 5 mid-sized companies, the ecosystem is going to be healthier than if you have one massive company, because the one massive company is just immediately going to gobble up all the small things and drive them out. Right.
Or just buy them, right? Facebook style.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it just depends. And that's not a bad thing as far as like,
well, it's just it's the ecosystem maturing. Like, it's capitalism, right? Like, it's capitalism to its endpoint. Not right. I don't even want to be negative, because the efficiencies in many ways are good, blah, 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 blah. But like, that's what it is.
But when you also correspond that with, on the corporate level, Wizards of the Coast producing a lot more product, pushing for, that everyone needs to buy, like, it's harder to be engaged with Magic now. Like, when there were fewer set releases and fewer cards coming out, you could really hone in on every set and picking out the couple gems that would affect what you cared about. When there's a new set every 2 months, it's a lot harder to do that, which then drives you to want to disengage and be more casual about it. And it's harder to produce competitive level content.
It's different.
Yeah, it's just different. And
I would say, look, as somebody who obviously is, I'm obviously not exclusively focused on the Commander side or the competitive side. I have 13 Commander decks, but as someone obviously who is extremely tied into the competitive side, like, it doesn't feel that hard for me. I can ignore most Commander releases, right? Like, I could just grind the current set on Arena, and I know everything that's relevant for the competitive formats. It feels pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
It's when you're a Commander player and now you have a bunch of secret layers. If you're in the mindset of, I must consume all Magic that exists,
you will exhaust yourself. You just can't do it.
But you don't have to do that.
No, you don't. And you can just choose to engage the content that is meaningful to how you play the game. And that's what you have to do. You have to pull back. Just
I
'cause
think
there's
I
more.
think if you were to tell, and I don't know, right, but like, I think it's very possible if you tell a Wizards employee, yeah, I thought I was pretty clued in with Magic, but I was playing a game and my buddy just played a card against me I've never seen before from this new set, and no, and actually the set came out like I thought it was new, but it came out like 2 years ago. I just never saw it. I think they might say that's cool.
Right. The way Richard Garfield literally intended.
Yeah. Like, so,
Hey,
just
what's
a thought.
on Black Lotus? I've never seen that Magic card before. What?
Yeah.
It does
Just-
what?
It's just food for thought on the subject, right? It's just
No.
there's a lot of this exists in the framing of how you choose to look at it, and it is very much a choice.
And I mean, the reality is there are things you can't change, right? Like you can't change how many sets Wizards is going to release, but or
You're not going to complain
Whether-
Mark Rosewater enough to change it, I promise.
right. But what you can do is you can change how you engage with it, right? Engage with the stuff that matters. Don't engage with the stuff that doesn't matter. Speak
And
with your
to use a famous quote, right? What is it? Have the grace to accept the things you cannot change.
Mhm.
Like how Wizards chooses to publish their own product. All you can
Yeah.
do is choose to how you interact with it.
That's right.
Yeah, I guess this is all good advice for people, but this is a good discussion, I think, because it is just sort of how everything looks a little different than it looked 10 years ago or
Yeah.
even 5 years ago. And I'm personally of the opinion that maybe it's swinging back around a little bit, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know what your take is there.
It wouldn't surprise me if Wizards has identified to some level that we have to have a good competitive card game. Like they've come to a realization we have to have a good competitive scene in order for the game to like churn through standard, which then fuels all these other formats and draft and things like that. And I think that they've realized that.
Well, one thing I want to
Anchor.
say before you, not to interrupt you, sorry, but
Yeah,
on
no.
the note of them realizing that, is that something people should understand is that it's really easy to think of Wizards as a monolith with institutional knowledge. In reality, the employees making decisions outside of a handful of lifers they cycle through every 5 years. It's a lot of the people that go through, they're not people who played Magic their whole lives and went to work for Wizards. They're people who got a X degree from business school and took a job at Wizards for 2 years, just passing through. And those people don't like these things you just kind of feel like and think matter to Magic because they always have. Those things are just kind of foreign concepts, not to everyone. But like that, you just have to understand that it is the institutional knowledge exists in a smaller handful of people than you maybe think inside of the building of Wizards of the Coast.
Right. And, and it also depends on how the people above them value their voice, those voices of those people.
And those people rotate as well.
Mm-hmm. And so the hope is that in the best times of Magic, you have people valuing the voices that have been there a long time, who have saged wisdom. It's the Chesterton's fence problem, right? Like you stumble upon a fence in the middle of a field as you're walking around and you go, why is this fence in the middle of the field? So
What's
do
the
you
answer?
tear? Well, the question is, do you tear it down?
Is it my field?
Yeah, it's your field, but you just bought it. Like you bought the property and there's a fence in the middle of
Why
this
are we
field.
calling Chester? I've never heard this one before.
Because the
Why is
person
it
who posed the question was
named Chesterton.
named Chesterton.
They just
But-
claiming credit for the fence on my property.
Yeah.
Get out of here, Chesterton.
But
his
the
name's
question
Chester.
is, do you tear it down? Because like in the analogy, if you tear it down without first finding it out, you may find out that fence was keeping out wolves from your livestock. Like there was wolves in that section and the fence shooed them away.
Sure.
But if you don't take the time to ask why it exists, you don't know whether taking it down is a smart decision or
Look,
not.
man, here's the deal, my guy. I hear you and Chesterton. He sounds like he hunted in the 1910s. Okay,
Probably.
in England. Okay. I, however, consume current British content, like Ted Lasso.
Mm.
And the phrase you're looking for is be curious, not judgmental. And when Giles challenged him to that dart game without asking if Ted Lasso had played darts every Sunday with his dad from age 10 until the day he died, he was being judgmental, not curious. And that's why he got his ass kicked.
You know what? Yours has a lot less baggage than mine.
I agree. No offense
And I
to
like
you.
yours better because I think Ted Lasso as a show is a work of art.
Agreed. All right, well,
Um,
that's where we're at with this. What do you have anything else you want to add?
No, I think that's great. But I think that we need to dive into the real reason everyone listens to the podcast.
It's true. You're right. It is time for Pick of the Week.
Pick of the week, pick of the week, pick of the week. Time for the pick of the week.
We were able to get a couple phoned in here from the crowd, so we'll just read these to you. Cass, of course, being the resident legacy expert here, has called out Nadu Wing Rider. What in the world is this card?
Bird Wizard and Nadu Wing Rider is a blue-green
Winged Wisdom,
legendary.
Sorry. Yeah.
Winged Wisdom, yes. Blue-green legendary from Modern Horizons 3 here. It is has flying and says creatures you control have whenever this creature becomes the target of a spell or ability, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land, put it onto the battlefield. Otherwise, put it into your hand. This ability only triggers twice each turn, and it's a 3/4.
I would like to label a complaint with the words triggers only twice each turn. Triggers only once each turn's a reasonable, like, okay, I get it. Triggering twice each turn, it's just, now come on, man.
You know what this says to me? This screams to me is they changed it to triggers only once each turn, and they went, this card is stone unplayable and useless.
Well,
and
like,
they go, make it 2. Make it
I
2.
mean, yeah, I get what you're. I guess it's not fair to to constrain yourself by things either being 1 or infinite, but like it's just dumb to read that line of text. I don't know.
Well, I think the harder
In this case,
thing-
it needs to, right? Yeah, it needs
Right.
to have it.
But the harder thing with all this, and we're seeing this with some of the design, is they're asking you to keep track of a
Yes,
lot more.
that was what I was
in your
yes.
games of Magic, right? So did it trigger once already, or has it triggered twice?
Yeah,
Do you
one
remember?
Is one, yeah, and like 1 or infinite is a really easy thing to do.
Mhm.
1, 2, or infinite.
Either it happened or it
Right.
didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cass's pick of the week is predicated, I should have said, on Nadu Winged Wisdom. The pick of the week is Outrider in Core. It is a uncommon, I believe, from an old set. And JJ, you, I don't know if you've been playing Magic enough for this one. Have you ever heard of Cephalid Breakfast?
Is
before-
that Kellogg's
before
new
tonight?
cereal?
Yeah, no, it's an old cereal and an old joke because every combo deck back in the day, every dumb combo deck especially, was named after a breakfast cereal, which include Cheerios, you might be familiar with, having won
Right.
Modern Pro Tour and then getting banned. Anyway, with Cephalid Breakfast, essentially Cephalid Illusionist or Nadu Winged Wisdom, when it becomes the target of a spell or ability, you get to do the thing, right? Winged Wisdom, it gives you card advantage. Cephalid Illusionist makes you mill 3. So if you have a way to target them for 0 mana, which you can just do this infinitely. So in the case of Cephalid Breakfast, with the Cephalid Illusionist, you mill your deck, you put 3 Narcomoebas directly into play since they got milled. You use those to sacrifice to Dread Return, which you flash back from your graveyard. You return Thassa's Oracle, win the game. It's the very classic combo. So this goes into that deck, if you look at it that way, in a fair version. It's not going to definitely win you the game immediately, but it is really, really good, and it probably opens up some other versions, and that is where Outrider and Core comes in, because this is a card that was reprinted in Time Spiral Remastered, so it's cheap, and it will allow you to do the free targeting of the creature in Modern.
Yeah, which I think will make for an interesting
Cephalid Lunch.
Cephalid lunch. There we go. We need to switch everything over into being
Well, the legacy
lunch
version is
moments.
Cephalid Breakfast. The modern version without cephalids, we'll call it Cephalid Dinner. Maybe Cephalid Brunch. Cephalid Brunch. I like.
I like brunch.
I like.
Let's just
brunch.
bring brunch to Modern.
Oh my! I got to make a deck list now and just put it out on Twitter so I can get credit for naming this. Wait a minute! I control the deck names. Yes, I cracked it. Somebody better
cracked
play
it.
this at the Pro Tour, and I will make Frank name it.
I've
Cephalid
learned that
brunch.
all you have to do is offer like $10,000 on Reddit to get people to start talking about playing your deck at the Pro Tour.
The coolest moment I had when I was a big YouTube creator, when I was doing a lot of YouTube comment, was somebody, we were at the Pro Tour in Barcelona in like 2019, and somebody else on staff was writing an article with somebody who had a cool deck. And they went and asked that person where they got their deck that they were like doing well with at the Pro Tour. And they were like, yeah, I got it off of this guy on YouTube, Corbin Hostler. It's called Mighty Modern. And they came back over to me and my ego just went through the roof.
It just
obviously.
never ends. Yeah.
It was a big like, moment for me.
Rightfully so. You clearly had arrived at that point, and there was only downhill from there.
Yeah, anyway, Cephalid Brunch on the way. I'm going to jump in here with my combo pick of the week. It's Kethis, the Hidden Hand. That's just the Flage, whatever that card is, the Helix Titan we mentioned earlier, works very well with Kethis. That's for sure. And Kethis these days probably includes Agatha's Soul Cauldron, which is Broken Things. Kethis, I played a ton of combo of when it was in Standard, and a couple other formats I've played out in Historic as well on Arena. Love the card. Anyway, it's climbed from about 350 up to about 425 over the past couple months, 2 months. I think it's going to keep going, and it's not going to take much at any point. It's never had a reprint. At any point, if this deck breaks out in a format, whatever format it is, it'll blow up. It's a mythic from Core Set 2020, which was summer 2019 when that released. No one has these, I'll tell you that.
That's a pretty good one. I like that a lot. I'm going to come in here with two because different picks here for you, but they're both going to be penny stock picks.
Ooh, I like it. Okay.
My first one is for Standard, and that is Deadly Cover-Up. It's from Murders at Markov Manor.
Karlov.
Nope, Narkov. It's definitely Markov. Murders at Karlov Manor, which now was several sets ago. But this card is sitting at a market price at the moment of 50 cents. And
what does Deadly Cover-Up do?
Deadly Cover-Up is 3 black. As an additional cost to cast this spell, you may collect Evidence 6. Destroy all creatures. If evidence was collected, exile a card from an opponent's graveyard, then search their library, hand, for any number of that card. It surgical extracts the card out of.
It's a Wrath plus a surgical.
Right. If you collect evidence.
I feel like there used to be a version of this card that cost 6 mana and didn't have. I feel like I used to play it, and I'm not going to be able to remember what it was called, but I feel like I used to play in Commander where it would Wrath and then do that, but maybe not. Either way,
yeah, I think
this
was
does it at
black,
5
white.
mana.
Yeah, but this does it at 5 mana. I think this card sees a reasonable amount of play in Standard at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
This set is dried up as much as it can be. Like, no one's opening Murders at Karlov Manor anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I think on top of that, like 50 cents, like if this goes to $1, you doubled up what you put into it. Mm-hmm. Right? Like you don't have to hit the moon where this goes to $3 or $4 for this to be a reasonable place for you to be. And the buy list on it, as you can see on MTGstocks Premium, has been climbing. So I suspect that if the buy list starts climbing, you're going to see a lot of upward pressure on that price, because they know that people need this card to play Standard, and as Standard's becoming the format of competitive play for the season, you're going to see a lot more of that.
Yeah. All right. You ready to hear? I found it.
Mm-hmm.
I was right. It did exist. I could picture the art in my head. 6 mana, Black Wrath. 4 black, Life's Finale. From New Phyrexia. Destroy all creatures, then search target opponent's library for up to 3 creatures and put them into their graveyard.
Yeah, that doesn't seem as good.
No, it does not. Let me get you reanimated. Like, people play whatever the card is that Buried Alive. They put that puts 3 creature cards from their graveyard, their library to their graveyard. Let me do it for you.
Here,
I get the idea of it. I get the idea of it. And that was the Commander wasn't a thing back then per se, but still, it's funny. I'm not crazy, at least, about that.
But I have one more for you, and this
All right,
one is for Modern, and I called it out earlier, and that is Cleansing Wildfire.
Yeah,
It has
fun.
one printing. It is from Zendikar Rising. That is it. You've got nowhere else to go. Zendikar Rising is not a widely open set.
No, that was a pandemic set.
So the reality is if we get to a point where Eldrazi lands are becoming a menace and Eldrazi are a menace, this is going to be the go-to answer because it says draw a card on it.
It's
And,
good. It's fun. I don't know if it's good enough, but it's,
I just
it's a bulk common, so it's a pick of the breaking bulk.
Right.
Breaking bulk of the week.
It's 10 cents. How can you go wrong? Right. You pick
yeah.
up 100 of these. What goes wrong?
Well, and you can kill a lot of your own Flagstones of Trocaire that way, and draw a card.
Yeah, but we'll see if it actually materializes into anything. But I think both of those are long shots that if things move a certain way, you will be happy to have bought in at 10 cents and 50 cents.
That's right. All right, and we'll give you DJ's pick on the way out of here. He's come in with a real boring, I gotta say, Eldrazi pick. Matter Reshaper. Boo, DJ. Your picks weren't fun like ours. Boo. Anyway, Matter Reshaper has climbed from bulk rare status of about 30 cents when it was reprinted in Commander Masters. It's climbed up to about 75 cents. Looks like it's still heading up. All Eldrazi stuff is going up. Can you play Matter Reshaper in Modern? Yes. Can you play it for more than about 2 rounds? No, because you will go 0-2 with Matter Reshaper in your deck. It is not a playable Modern card, but it is likely to continue rising in price because it is a good Magic card, right? Like, I would not be at all disappointed to play a Singing Commander, I'll tell you that, but it's fallen out of favor. It's not a Modern card these days.
I think this is one of those things where people are just like on autopilot trying to build the deck based on what happened during Eldrazi Winter. And they're like, I remember Reality Smasher and Matter Reshaper. And
well, it also could be as
Eldrazi
simple as
Mimic.
and the reason it's a good pick is because it's as simple as people plugging in Eldrazi into a search engine for their Commander deck, and you're going to get everything that popped up from all of the years of that being associated, like this card being associated with what you're going to Google. Plus, again, super happy to play this card in my Commander deck.
Yeah, I mean, it's still a reasonable Magic card in other formats.
It's exactly the kind of, like, when you're playing a creature type deck, a Kindred deck in Commander. So I have werewolves, merfolk, wizards,
elementals.
Do what?
Elementals.
Oh, and you have elementals, yeah. So so like when I play those, and I have dinosaurs. So because I have Owen Grady in blue. I love it. So when you play those type of decks, you typically struggle to find the low end, right? Like Merfolk is interesting. There's lots of middling low end cards, right? But you end up with like lots of cards that you get past the first 20 cards, and then you need cards that are like limited fodder that kind of fill your curve or just have the right creature type on them. But so finding 2, 3, 4 mana cards in your particular creature type that are good in Commander is kind of harder than you would think. Like, this is something I've encountered with dinosaurs a lot. A lot of the dinosaurs either are designed for 1v1 play or they cost 7 mana, right? Yeah. So it's very difficult to find the 2, 3, 4 mana dinos that actually work. And Eldrazi is certainly the same way, where everything costs 9 mana. Having something as good as Matter Reshaper that pressures the board, gives you value, blah, blah, blah. And Commander, very good. So don't play in Modern. Do play in Commander. Pick up it under $1. Nice pick, DJ. Yeah.
Well, I've got one more pick of the week to send you out on, Corbin.
Okay.
And I'm going to bring this pick of the week when I see you here in a couple weeks. But we recently, in my small little 2-bit town, got a store that is reselling Amazon returns.
Perfect.
So one of those big bin stores where they dump everything.
But you have a brand new one in a tiny town.
Mm-hmm.
This is clean.
Yeah, this is clean. And on $2 Tuesday, I went through and I saw this, and I couldn't help but pick it up because I know he's your hero. for you. We got a
Dr.
nice little
John
John Hamm
Hamm.
action figure for Corbin.
Oh, I'm so happy. Thank you, JJ.
So my pick of the week is go buy things at your local bin store because everyone returns everything to Amazon.
Well,
and they
yeah,
just
it's
throw it
true.
in a box.
We found we came across a $90 baby strap for $4 at Goodwill a couple weeks ago.
We got one of those wet dry vacs that are like a vacuum cleaner, like the really nice
I
floor
remember
cleaner
those.
ones. Yeah, we got it for $50. It's like a $400 wet dry vac.
Yeah, dude, vacuums are expensive. I remember last time we bought a vacuum, it felt like a bigger deal than buying a car. The amount of thought that got in planning that went put into that.
Yeah. Although it makes me feel old because we just spent at least 30 seconds to a minute talking about vacuum cleaners and
Talking about our lives, JJ. And yes, we are old. That's true. On that note, everybody, thank you for listening to Brainstorm Brewery. Some of you have been listening to this podcast since the beginning, which makes you old as well. Some of you are new to this show, in which case I just say why. Either way, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week on Brainstorm Brewery. Make sure to check out our sponsors, MTGstocks, as well as Coalesce Apparel and Design. You can use the gift code Brainstorm Brewery there, and you can support us directly, which means supporting great people like our editor, JJ, at patreon.com/BSB. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Brainstorm Brewery. See you next week.
see ya.